Hello, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever and whenever you are listening from. Welcome to our podcast where we discuss the history of mathematics and mathematics education. And it's me again, Eric D. Hovillano, your moderator for today's podcast. And for today's episode, we'll explore a fascinating historical question that historians of mathematics continue to debate: the handmaiden of faith. To what extent did religious institutions accelerate or sometimes constrain the development of mathematics across different pre-modern cultures? And to explore this topic, I am joined by my three colleagues from our PhD in Education major in Mathematics Education program. Without further ado, our first panelist, Sir Jonathan Baraga. Say hello, Sir Jonathan.
Well,
A fellow graduate of the MA in Mathematics Education at Bicol University and a former DOST scholar and current EPED mathematics teacher. And our second panelist, the one and the only, Sir Jong Basol. Hi naman dyan, sir. He is a
Opo.
graduate of MA Mathematics in University of the Philippines, Diliman, also a DepEd mathematics teacher and currently teaching at Batanes National Science High School. And our third panelist, the only woman in our podcast, Happy Women's Month, Mom Jaden Ligaspi Lopez.
Hello po.
She is a graduate of Masters in Mathematics Teaching at Batangas State University, who will help us examine mathematical traditions in the pre-modern East Asia. Now that we introduce our panelists, may I ask the panelists some insights in our topic for today? What does the handmaiden of faith means, Sir Jonathan?
Thank you for that introduction, Sir Eric. And I think that this topic is really fascinating because it challenges some common assumptions about the relationship between religion and mathematics. So, the phrase handmaiden of faith has often been used to describe the idea that mathematics historically served religious purposes, and that is in astronomy, calendars, architecture, or ritual life. But when historians examine the historical record more closely, the relationship between religion and mathematics appears far more complex. Isn't that right, Sir John?
Yeah, I agree. In fact, in some societies, religious institutions encourage mathematical inquiry by creating intellectual communities and practical problems that required mathematical solutions.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Sir Jonathan and Sir Basol. Now, how about you, Ma'am Jaden?
Well, in other contexts, they mainly preserve existing knowledge while new developments emerge elsewhere.
Well, that's insightful. We have already learned a lot just in that introduction. And as we go on, we will learn more about our topic as we will look at it in three historical contexts: that is, in the Islamic scholarly world, the medieval Europe, and the pre modern China. Now, let's begin our discussion. Sir Jonathan, let's begin with the Islamic world, which historians often describe as one of the most dynamic intellectual environments for mathematics in the pre-modern period. My question is, what stood out to you about the relationship between religion and mathematical learning in this context, Sir Jonathan?
I think that the Islamic world provides a very good example of how religion and mathematics could actually support each other. One of the most striking things about the medieval Islamic world is that religious institutions were not only places for worship, but they were also centers for intellectual life. In fact, mosques and scholarly circles functioned as spaces where scholars studied geology, philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics together. And a great example of this intellectual environment is the scholar Avicenna. Although he is widely known for his contributions to medicine and philosophy, he also studied mathematics as part of a broader scholarly curriculum. Another figure mentioned in the readings is Alcala Ali. He contributed to the development of algebraic symbolism and notation. His work shows how mathematical knowledge continued to evolve within the Islamic scholarly tradition. But what I find particularly fascinating is that some religious practices required mathematical knowledge. For example, for determining the direction of Mecca, it requires geometric reasoning. For calculating prayer times, it requires astronomical observations. And another example is for organizing the Islamic lunar calendar, it requires a precise calculation.
Well, that's correct. And maybe because of those needs, scholars develop sophisticated methods, maybe in astronomy, in geometry, and in algebra. Do you agree with that, sir?
That's correct, Sir Eric. In fact, historians such as George Saliba argued that these religious and institutional needs stimulated important developments in mathematical and astronomical research.
Well, that's interesting. Now, can you tell us more about the developments that happened during this period, Sir Jong?
Well, another important development during this period was the translation movement, where scholars translated classical works such as Euclid's Elements and mathematical knowledge from India into Arabic. However, these works were not simply preserved, they were studied, interpreted, and expanded.
So instead, they help create an intellectual environment in which mathematical inquiry could flourish. How about you, Ma'am Jadine? What interests you the most in this period?
Well, what interests me most is the idea that religious practice itself created mathematical problems that scholars needed to solve. It shows that mathematics wasn't just an abstract pursuit, but something deeply connected to everyday religious life.
Well, that's an important point, our dear listeners, because it challenges the common assumption that religion and scientific inquiry were always in conflict. But, panelists, do you think scholars in this context were mainly applying earlier mathematical knowledge, or were they also developing new mathematical ideas, Sir Jonathan?
Well, on that question, sir, I think that it really gets to the heart of how knowledge developed in that period. Well, it appears that scholars were doing far more than simply applying earlier knowledge. Just like the Greek works such as Euclid's Elements certainly provided an important foundation, and scholars in the Islamic intellectual tradition treated those texts as starting points for further investigation. The astronomical calculations related to prayer times and the direction of Mecca required increasing precision, which encouraged scholars to refine mathematical techniques, particularly in algebra and trigonometry. So, rather than simply transmitting earlier knowledge, they were actually actively extending and developing mathematical ideas during that
Mm.
time.
So if I get it right, earlier historical narratives sometimes portray the Islamic world mainly as a transmitter of Greek mathematics. Do you think that interpretation still holds today, Ma'am Jaden?
Yes, and well, in fact, recent scholarship suggests a much more dynamic pictures. Scholars in the Islamic world emerge or engage deeply with earlier mathematical traditions through commentary, interpretation, and refinement. In many cases, they adapted those ideas to new intellectual and practical contexts, particularly in astronomy and algebra.
So in that sense, religious institutions did not restrict mathematics but actually helped generate new problems that required mathematical solutions. But let's jump to another context. But when we turn to medieval Europe, that situation seems somewhat different. And Sir Jong, how did religious institutions influence mathematics education in medieval Europe?
During the medieval period, most formal education in Europe took place in monasteries and cathedral schools, which were closely connected to the church. Mathematics formed part of the quadrivium, which included arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Students studied classical texts, especially Euclid's Elements, which remained central to mathematical education for centuries. In this sense, the church played an important role in preserving classical mathematical knowledge. However, mathematical learning during this period was often relatively conservative compared to the development we see in the Islamic world. Later developments began to emerge through abacus schools, which trained merchants in practical arithmetic. A key turning point came with Fibonacci's Liber Abaci, which introduced the Hindu-Arabic numerical system to Europe and demonstrated its advantages for commercial calculations.
So what you have said, that the church played an important role in preserving classical mathematical knowledge, well, that contrast with Islamic world, which is really interesting because in one case, religious institutions stimulated mathematical inquiry,
Mhm.
just like in the Islamic world. But here in medieval Europe, they seem to have functioned more as custodians of earlier knowledge. So would it be fair to say that the church primarily preserved mathematical knowledge while later innovations were driven by economic developments?
Yes, that's a fairly reasonable interpretation. Monasteries and cathedral schools preserved classical texts, but later mathematical innovations were closely tied to commercial activities and the needs of trade.
So would you say that expanding trade networks helped transform mathematical practice in Europe?
Yes. Merchants needed reliable methods for calculation, accounting, and currency exchange, which encouraged the spread of more efficient numerical systems.
So that shift in relationship of religion to math becomes even clearer when we examine our third historical context. So let's jump to another context, which is pre-modern China. Ma'am Jaden, how did mathematics develop in pre-modern China?
Well, in China, mathematics was closely connected to the needs of state administration rather than religion. The imperial government relied on mathematics for tasks such as land surveying, taxation, engineering projects, and calendar construction. Because of this, mathematical knowledge became important for officials preparing for position in the civil service bureaucracy. And one of the most influential mathematical texts in this tradition is the nine chapters on the mathematical arts. And unlike Greek mathematical traditions that emphasize formal proof, this work focuses on practical methods for solving real world problems.
So in gist, mathematics in China functioned less as the handmaiden of faith and more as what we might call the handmaiden of governance. Is that true?
Yes, you get it. That's a good way of describing it. Mathematical knowledge was valued because it was essential for managing the empire.
So does that administrative context explain why Chinese mathematics emphasize procedural problem solving, Sir Basol?
Yeah, I think so. The focus on practical problems reflects the administrative priorities of the state.
So across these three contexts, the Islamic, the medieval, and the China, mathematics seems to develop in response to different institutional demands. Do you agree with that, panelists?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes.
So upon listening all three cases, one pattern becomes clearer now that mathematics often flourishes when institutions, whether may it be religious, economic, or political, create sustained demand for quantitative knowledge. Say, for example, in the Islamic world, religious practices stimulated mathematical inquiry, while in medieval Europe, expanding trade networks encourage new computational methods, and in China, the administrative needs of the imperial state shape the mathematical reasoning. So, to relate it to our field as mathematics educators, what might these historical examples suggest about mathematics education today? Let's start with Sir Jonathan.
Maybe they remind us that mathematics has always developed in response to real world problems. And I think that sometimes we forget what and when we teach mathematics today. So there is a need to connect mathematics to real context in order to reflect how mathematics developed historically.
And that connection between mathematics and practical needs remains important for how we design mathematics education today.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Jaden. So, to conclude, what is now our final verdict on the relationship between religion and the development in mathematics? Let's start with Sir Jonathan.
Well, as for me, to answer our main question, the historical evidence suggests that religious institutions neither simply accelerated nor completely stifled mathematical progress. Instead, their influence depended on the social and cultural context in which they operated. In some
Thank
cases, religion created practical problems that stimulated mathematical innovation, while in others, it primarily preserved existing knowledge. What this shows is that mathematics has always developed within broader institutional and cultural frameworks. And I guess that is my point on that question.
thank you, Sir Jonathan. How about you, Ma'am Jaden?
Well, for me, the development of mathematics across different cultures was deeply connected to practical needs, whether religious, economic, or governmental. And as for me, the Islamic world used religion to drive mathematical progress, while medieval Europe saw innovation sparked by commerce. And China focused on solving governance related problems. And as educators, our challenge is to make mathematics relevant to today's world by showing our students how math can solve real world problems.
And for the finale, for his final words, Sir Basol.
Well, in my opinion, the whole inevitable conflict narrative is a myth. So, religious institutions actively accelerated mathematical progress by building intellectual hubs and demanding solutions to complex faith based problems. And even when the real innovation was happening out in the markets, the monasteries and temples were the ones preserving the knowledge. So, the ultimate takeaway here is that math isn't just abstract logic. It's profoundly human tradition, shaped entirely by the cultures and institutions that needed it.
So thank you so much, our dear panel. So there we have it. To end this podcast, well, the relationship between religion and mathematics in pre-modern societies cannot just be reduced to just a simple story of conflict. In some contexts, religious institutions accelerated mathematical progress by creating intellectual communities and generating new mathematical problems. And in others, they preserve knowledge while innovation emerge through economic or administrative needs. But in across those cultures, mathematics develop within institutional frameworks that shape both its growth and its direction. So understanding this history allows us to see mathematics, again, just like what Sir Basil said, not just as abstract knowledge, but as a human intellectual tradition deeply connected to culture, institution, and society. So, what about you, our dear listeners? Hello, folks. What are your thoughts about it? Again, to what extent did religious institutions accelerate or stifle mathematical progress across different pre-modern cultures? Let us know what you think, and let's talk about it in our next podcast. Thank you for joining us in this discussion, especially, of course, to our fine panelists, hoping that I'll have you again in this podcast and talk more about mathematics education. Thank you so much, dear panelists, Sir Jonathan, Sir Basol, and Mom Jaden. Again, thank you so much.
Thank
Say
you.
hi, say goodbye to our viewers, our listeners.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye,
Goodbye, everyone.
guys. Thank you for listening. And again, this is Eric Di Hovellano. Thank you.